Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar providing some application guidance for our 2016 Ignite LA Student Science Awards. So, presumably, you're here because you're interested in applying for the 2016 Ignite LA Student Science Awards, which is again a fellowship award program that will provide all expenses paid Earthwatch expeditions to selected high school students over the summer of 2016. Including airfare, travel, food, lodging, and even recreational activities, and essentially just ensuring that awardees have a great time while they're on their expeditions. So if you're here, presumably you've already been sold on this, you're interested in getting hands-on scientific research and going out in the field this summer. But in order to do that, you do need to submit an application to be considered. And this is what this webinar will hopefully be covering to help walk you through any questions you might have, as well as what we're looking for on the application itself. So thanks for joining me today. So in terms of the 2016 Ignite LA timeline, so in terms of where I'm assuming you are right now is that you have already gone to the earthwatch.org/ignite website. You filled out an interest form with your information, just providing that confirmation that you qualify. You're a high school sophomore, junior from Los Angeles County, and you have basically received an email back from us providing that confirmation saying, you are qualified. Here is a link to the online application portal as well as a link to the application workbook, which also helps to address some of these questions. So assuming you've gotten that covered, essentially you should have that email. And if you haven't done this already, that email should include a link to the actual application portal. So that is, you do need to go there in order to set up an account. So if you haven't done that already, you should probably go back and click that link in your email, and you'll get transported to a website that looks kind of like that screenshot to your left there. In terms of the gray background, it'll kind of direct you directly to this login page. And when you get there, if you've never signed up before, what you want to do is go to where that red circle is, where it says in the fine print, if you don't have an Earthwatch account, please click here to register and complete an application. So you'll be able to sign in with your email address and create your unique password. And basically, once you confirm that, no, I'm not a robot, you'll get an email confirmation back saying, okay, you've set up your account, you're ready to go. So once you've done that registration, you'll be able to go back to that website and submit all your information directly online, and that's how we receive your application information. We'll also continue to provide you email reminders basically as often as we can before the December 14th deadline to remind you that this is due. So be sure to kind of log in there and make sure you're set up so that you can begin filling out your responses. So assuming you are able to do all that, you completely submit your application before the December 14th deadline, you'll be notified by April 2016 of whether you're going to be going on an expedition with us or not. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward and you covered that ground. So in terms of moving on to the actual content, so now that we've taken care of those housekeeping items, you're ready to start creating your application or filling out your application responses. A brief reminder of kind of who gets these awards in terms of what we're looking for, what we're looking to see in your application. So in terms of the origin of this particular program, this program was started by the Durfee Foundation, which is a local nonprofit based out of Santa Monica, based on the experience of one of the founders, Michael Newkirk, who actually does review the application, so this is directly from the horse's mouth. But essentially his quote, which really encapsulates what Durfee is looking for in terms of who they send on these expeditions, is that, we look for creative-minded students, not really your sciencey types per se, and we want to know who they are and not what kind of grades they get. In fact, we don't ask for academic transcripts at all. So hopefully if you've taken a look at the application, you realize, there's no requirement for SAT scores or GPA or, any of those kind of academic related questions. All the questions are very much based on who you are as an individual. So in terms of why we ask those questions, what we're looking for is students who are well-rounded. So when we say well-rounded, what we mean is, you're involved in a lot of activities, you have lots of interests and hobbies, you're involved in extracurriculars, beyond just being a high school student. Also, in terms of the creativity, we want to emphasize that the whole intention of this award is basically to give students hands-on experience with science that they might not be getting otherwise. So, if you don't have a really extensive science background, you're not in a ton of AP environmental science classes or other types of science classes, that's not a disadvantage to you in terms of winning one of these fellowships. So, if you don't have a science background, that's perfectly fine to be honest about that and say, I don't have a lot of experience with science because, this award program is designed for your demographic, essentially. And another thing that should make you feel better about your odds in terms of getting an award or putting in an application is that we do cap the maximum of students that we take from any given high school to 2. What that means for you is that you're not necessarily competing against every single student in Los Angeles County who puts in an application. You're really competing to be the representative from your high school and then be evaluated against other high school candidates. So hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better about not feeling super overwhelmed about your chances of going on one of these expeditions. So hopefully that helps you feel a little bit more confident in that. And in terms of application requirements, hopefully you got this from your workbooks or kind of figured that out in terms of what we're asking for. But the application itself is very basic. So what we're looking for on that online portal once you log in is, the 3 short answer questions that we have provided, which we'll go into, and in your basic personal info. So this is all stuff that your name, email address, things like that, some basic parent and guardian and contact info, including email. Since your parents and guardians will have to sign off and, approve that you're okay to go off for 2 weeks during the summer if you do get awarded with one of these expeditions. Also, there should be a section on health and safety. So that's basically just, information about yourself. If you can't swim or you have a bee allergy or any of those things that will keep you safe in the field, that's where you want to bring it up. And we don't discriminate based on your responses. So if you honestly do have some sort of allergy or mobility issue or some sort of health concern, we just use that information to make sure you're going on an expedition that will keep you safe. So for example, if you can't swim, we're not going to send you on the expedition that goes out to the ocean and expects you to be able to swim around. So, things like that. So, definitely feel free to be honest on that. And once you complete your section of the application, the only thing that's needed from there is 2 recommendations. So again, we do need 1 recommendation from an actual classroom science teacher who's had you, as well as 1 from either any other teacher, which could be any subject, or any other adult mentor. So what we mean by that is that, if you don't want to necessarily go back to a classroom teacher, you could ask someone like a coach or a pastor or a tutor or, someone you volunteer with, basically any other mentor who can kind of provide a good perspective on who you are as a person. So feel free to exercise your flexibility on that. And essentially, just make sure you submit your application by, again, December 14th, and you'll be considered, assuming that your recommenders also follow up with the recommendations. Okay, so let's go into the actual writing of your application. So assuming you've covered all those bases, now it's kind of getting into the part that you actually have to prepare, which is those 3 short answer questions that I promised to talk about. So the actual application questions you can see on the online portal as well as the workbook. Basically, question 1 is asking about your extracurricular activities, past experiences, etc. Question 2 is asking, where did you grow up and how does that shape your outlook on life? And the third question is, what would you do with a vacant lot if you suddenly came into possession of one? So we're going to go through and break down each of those questions. And I'm not going to necessarily tell you what to write, but kind of how to think about what you want to write. So let's get into it. So for question 1, so that one is asking about your extracurricular activities, past trips, etc. So this question is essentially asking, what do you do with your spare time? So once you get back from school, kind of what are you into? What do you participate in? What do you volunteer? Where do you basically how do you spend that extra time when you're not in the classroom? And this is also the portion where you can bring up any programs or camps or trips that have really influenced you or changed your perspective on life. Things that, where you went on this trip and suddenly you have new interests or new hobbies as a result. So anything that was really influential in terms of your past experience. Also, you want to bring up, any hobbies or interests that you have. So if you really spend a lot of time on a particular hobby or interest, photography or art, or, you play music, these are all the things that you want to bring up in this particular section. So I know that's a little bit, that can be kind of overwhelming. So we're actually going to break this down in terms of, like an example student and kind of help you think, from if you were looking at another student, kind of like what would they list? And hopefully that'll help you come up with your own answers. So for this first question, I'm going to give you the theoretical example of a student named Maria. So let's say Maria plays on her school soccer team, and when not in practice, she helps out at her parents' small business. At church on Sundays, she helps with the children's ministry to babysit toddlers. And last year, she worked as a camp counselor in the Los Angeles Mountains. So taking this theoretical example, there's a lot of things that you could list in your application if you were Maria. Theoretically, just based on this information, you could list all of them because these are all activities that she participates in outside of the classroom. So for example, she's really involved in sports. She works at a small business in her spare time. She's volunteering at a local church. She's working a lot with toddlers and children. She even going so far as to take a position as a camp counselor over the summer. And maybe that experience in the Los Angeles Mountains really influenced her in terms of her interest in the outdoors, or just being more involved in the community, or anything else that might have changed her perspective. So to sum it up, if you're Maria, you probably want to bring up all of these things. And in terms of applying this to your own application is, you also want to think about similar activities that you participate in. So if you're very involved with sports, or you have a lot of interests or hobbies, or, you volunteer somewhere, these are all things that you want to bring up in your application for this particular question. And I want you to keep in mind as well what the priorities were. So to go back to what Durfee is looking for, again, think about, they're requesting well-rounded, creative, and motivated students. So anything that you can bring up in terms of your activities that show that are probably things that you want to list in this portion of the application. And again, don't forget about hobbies and interests. I mean, if this is something you dedicate time to and that kind of rounds you out as an individual, then that's something you want to bring up. As well as community service. So a lot of your high schools do have community service programs or community service requirements. So, if you're picking projects that have a similar theme, or, you're actively, volunteering at a particular location, like these are all things that you want to bring up, as well as any field trips that might have really influenced you in terms of, why do you participate in the things you do now, or how is that changing your trajectory in terms of what you plan to study in college, or, what you plan to study next year. So again, this is, just make sure you're thinking about all those different activities and how they play out. So hopefully that was pretty straightforward. So for question 2, the one that's asking, where did you grow up and how does that influence your outlook on life? So taking a theoretical example of a student named Michael. So Michael grew up in a residential neighborhood in Culver City. A lot of his friends live on the same block, so they often ride bikes together or play baseball and basketball at the park down the street. At school, he's an active athlete and is on a lot of sports teams. He also frequently signs up to do community cleanup events at that same park and elsewhere in his neighborhood. So thinking of this theoretical profile of a student, there are a lot of things in this environment or where Michael is growing up that's making him a good athlete, right? So if you can imagine the opposite scenario, so if he had grown up in a high-rise building in downtown Los Angeles and was completely isolated from his friends, didn't have access to facilities to play these nice team sports, that probably would lessen his chances of becoming a really good athlete in these particular sports, right? So the fact that he has a park nearby and that they do have basketball courts and baseball fields, the fact that he has friends who actually are like within walking distance or biking distance, so that has an influence as well, because he's suddenly having the opportunity to play a lot of team sports that maybe if you're if you're living by yourself, you don't necessarily have access to. And also thinking about how that's influenced, in addition to his activities, but like how does that influence his interest in terms of why does he suddenly care about his local park and neighborhood? Why is he participating necessarily in community cleanup events at this particular park or location? And the answer to that is, he's obviously very invested in his community. By having kind of living in a neighborhood where, the park is playing a central role in like kind of what he does every day, he's suddenly invested in his local community that he might not have had if he had grown up somewhere else. So you can kind of see how these kind of physical factors in terms of a physical park or a physical residential neighborhood, or the fact that lots of people live nearby, these are all factors in the environment that are influencing his outlook on life. So that's if you were Michael, those are all the things that you want to bring up in your application. So in terms of tips for this particular question as you're filling out your application responses, is again, there's no right answer for this, only your answer. So, I mean, if you think about it, there's no way, the answer to this question is like completely personal. So, you grew up where you grew up and you have a particular perspective on life as a result of that. And that's what the reviewers are hoping to hear from you with this application question. And if you're still struggling to kind of figure out how you describe your history or where you grew up, a good guiding question is to ask yourself, what did you like or dislike about where you grew up? So, for example, if you grew up in a really crowded, very high density living community or complex where you're really packed in, maybe you like or dislike that. So if you dislike it, maybe that explains your interest in going out to the outdoors because you want to get away from people. Same thing as, if you really like something, if you love the fact that your neighborhood has an awesome gym nearby where you like to go and play sports. I mean, that's something you want to bring up if that's actually influencing what you're interested in or what you're currently active in. Also, it's important to think about, why do you like the things you do? Often, if you have a particular interest or you have, certain hobbies or, things like that, you can usually tie that back to something that you were either familiar with or grew up with, or something totally opposite. So if it's something, I really like this sport or I really like this hobby because I never got a chance to do it growing up, that's something you want to bring up. And same thing vice versa. You really like this sport or activity or interest because you actually had a lot of exposure to it as a kid. So these are all things that you want to think about as you're pulling this application question together. So hopefully that was helpful in terms of that particular question. So moving on to question 3. So this is the one that's testing your creativity. So this is asking you if you were to come into possession of a vacant lot, what would you do to it? Like what would you want to see or build or anything else? It's totally an open creativity question. So that can be a little tough. So if you're trying to brainstorm some answers to this about, thinking about, well, what would I really do with a vacant lot? You could try answering some of this or doing this exercise. So one thing you might want to ask is, currently just based on my current interest, like what is my favorite thing? And why do I like it? And if someone were to come up to me and say they didn't like it, or I wanted to involve my friends and have them do it too, what would my reasoning be? So you can apply this to pretty much anything. So if your favorite thing is pizza, for example, even, you could bring that up and say, my favorite thing is pizza and I like it because it tastes amazing. And I love the flavors and I think it's so heartening and, it's really good. And if someone were to come up to me and say, I hate pizza and I think it's awful, you could respond back to say I think you should like it because it's actually delicious. It's, got a lot of flavor to it. You can add so many ingredients, and then just basically bringing up those reasons will kind of help you in terms of brainstorming something. So maybe because I love pizza so much, I want to bring this to the world. So I would take a vacant lot and create my own custom pizzeria where everyone can use fresh local ingredients and all these different flavors that they're not used to. So it's a silly example, but it's something that can help get the creative juices going, and then not kind of allowing yourself to not include certain things because you think it might not apply. So just to kind of get that exercise going about what really drives you in terms of your passions or your interests or things that you're really into right now. Those are all things that you want to think about as you're trying to develop this question. And also this question assumes that you actually have the space to kind of do whatever really floats your boat in terms of, you've always wanted to have this in your neighborhood or you've always wanted to, have access to this. What would you do or what would you want to see in this particular situation? And again, this is just a creativity question. So, think carefully about, giving yourself some time to think about it, in terms of, what would you actually want to do or kind of what best expresses your creativity in terms of a particular idea. And another thing to keep in mind for this particular question is that you want to make sure this is realistic. So you don't want to fall into the trap of kind of treating it as, oh, because it's creative, I can, just kind of make something up and not think about how it would actually get implemented. So, you could probably rule out a lot of things with keeping this in mind. So, for example, you're probably, if you have a limited to no budget, you're probably not going to be able to say, I'm just going to build a $10 billion machine that does this. So you want to kind of force yourself to like scale back and think about, okay, well, if I'm realistically going to implement this idea, what do I need? So you want to make sure that you're not trying to use money to kind of just make up for a lack of creativity, or making sure that it's something that's actually realistic, and actually putting some thought into how you would do this or how it would actually look on the ground. Those are things that the reviewers are going to be looking at for this particular question. Other than that, I mean, remember, this is your imaginary lot. There's not, a right answer to this, and it should reflect your interests and your ideas and kind of what you would want to see. And for those of you who are more creative or artistically inclined, in terms of, you just feel more comfortable drawing things or, kind of like showing a visual, the application does have an option to upload a drawing of your lot. Again, this is totally optional if you just feel like that strengthens your application or you want to use it, or if you decide not to, that's fine as well. So you do have that option if that you think that'll help you in terms of answering this question. Um, Other than that, I mean, those are the three basic essay questions. Hopefully, they're pretty straightforward in terms of what we're looking for. In terms of general writing tips, you might want to consider a couple ideas for that. Again, trying to use active voice. So hopefully you've heard of this before, but it's the idea of, you're using, a more active voice when you're describing what you're doing. So for example, instead of using something like, oh, I went, you could say, I participated, I volunteered, I worked, I ran, I led, kind of really showing your role in your activities and showing that, you're the primary agent for this. Also, another thing to consider is you want to avoid the passive voice if you can. So again, passive versus active voice is, for example, the dog was walked by me versus I walk the dog. So you want to make sure that you're using your words wisely and showing that you're using the active voice. Again, want to take a basic thing with a spell check, so the application does do this for you to a degree where they'll, have a red underline if they think that you spelled that wrong. But you do want to review that and make sure that you're spelling things correctly, so that doesn't give a bad impression to the reviewers. Also for grammar, it's sometimes helpful to actually read it out loud to make sure that as you're reading it, it makes sense. So that'll help you catch things like sentence fragments or, just like hanging fragments of it, like if you're, it just doesn't make sense in terms of when you read it. So that's another technique you can use. And also, you're always welcome to ask someone you trust to review. So if you just need another pair of eyes on it, just asking someone you trust to just go over it and make sure that it looks good and sounds okay, will be helpful with this as well. And also, if you're still kind of struggling to figure out what to write in terms of content, again, you want to keep that guiding question of, what makes you unique or special, as like kind of your guiding question for deciding what to write about, because you really want to set yourself apart as, I'm not just another high school student. These are the things that make me a unique individual, because that's what the reviewers want to see and hear about. And also, thinking about, telling your story, like what really drives you in your daily life, or why do you like the things that you do, or why are you interested or spend so much time on particular activities, because that's the reviewers kind of want to get to know you as an individual. And also thinking about who or what are kind of the main characters in your life or the main factors that really influence you, and kind of describe how that plays out. And if you're still stuck, it's always useful to kind of ask some more creative questions to kind of get the juices flowing a little bit in terms of figuring out what to write. So, you could ask your, theoretical questions of yourself. So, for example, if I had $1 million, what would I actually do with it? And what does that say about me in terms of my interests or like what I like? Same thing, if I had 3 wishes or a free dream home, what would be in it? Kind of asking these theoretical questions just to kind of see, what really gets me going in terms of motivation or, things that I like or things that I want to, that I'm passionate about. So final writing note about this, it's really not a long application. So question 1, asking about your extracurriculars, should be 100 words or less. Question 2, asking about, where you grew up and how that influences your outlook on life, is 200 words or less. And question 3, asking about what would you do with a vacant lot, is only 250 words or less. So as a reminder, 250 words is only around a page double space. So that's not a ton of writing in terms of, your actual responses. And 100 words words is around a paragraph, so that's even shorter. So since this isn't a lot of space, just make sure it counts. Hopefully that makes the actual writing of it easier, since we're not necessarily grading you on how many pages you can put out, but more about the content, like what are you actually trying to say, and who are you as an individual. So make sure to keep that in mind when you're preparing your application responses. So with that, once you have your essay questions all filled out and your, the basic contact information that we discussed before, basically that completes your section of the application. As soon as you click submit, whatever teacher or mentor recommendation emails that you typed in to say, these are the people I want my recommendations from, they'll get a notice basically saying, the students completed their application. We're now ready for your recommendation. So general tips for this last component, since that kind of wraps up the application process, general tip is definitely to ask early. So since a teacher or mentor is basically doing you a favor by writing you a recommendation, you want to make sure that you're respectful of their time by asking very early in the process, basically as soon as you want a recommendation from them, to help you out and say, give them the heads up, like, yes, I would like a recommendation from you. Another reason you want to do this is that the recommender can't really do anything until you finish your application. So until you actually click submit and you're done, the recommender won't receive that email saying, here's the link to actually fill out your recommendation. So keep that in mind. Also, we as a resource for this, we want to make sure that the teacher at least has some time to think about the responses. So if you look at your application workbook that you received in that email, the last page is a recommender worksheet, which you're more than welcome to print out and actually give to your teacher or mentor to say, because it includes the list of questions they'll be asked, as well as the word limits, and a little bit of background on the actual fellowship. So feel free to kind of include that in your ask to say, here's all the information on what I'm asking for, and really try to get their help in getting these filled out. Also, another thing to note is that even if you were to procrastinate until the December 14th deadline, which we don't generally recommend, but they have until December 28th to actually fill in their recommendations for you. However, the issue with this is that this does tend to fall during the winter holidays. So for example, if you have a teacher that you're trying to reach out to and get them to fill out the recommendation, if they're on vacation as soon as winter break starts, they might have difficulty reaching this deadline or be able to access the application. So asking early can actually help you in terms of making sure the teacher has enough time to actually get their recommendation in without having to cut into their holiday time or anything like that. So keep that in mind. Also, you want to make sure that you get your teacher or mentor's email address so that they'll get the notice as soon as you complete your application. So again, tied to asking early is to make sure you get their contact information so they'll receive that notification and be able to fill out their portion of the application. Also, final recommendation on this is that you want to pick people who know you well. Since this is such an important, a big chunk of the application or what the reviewers see, they're really looking for people who can describe you as a unique individual, and really provide that third-person perspective on, what is the student like, like what makes them a good candidate for this fellowship program. So, they're going to really help make or break your application in terms of, providing that third-person perspective. So make sure you select wisely in terms of who's providing that recommendation for you. So final reminders, that's pretty much the application process. So you've got your teacher recommendations, you've got your portion of the application. Only recommendation is just basically start as early as you can. Again, it's not very long. You want to make sure you're asking your recommenders really early in the process. You might want to mention this to your parents and guardians since you need their contact information and sign off to apply for this fellowship opportunity. But other than that, it should be pretty straightforward, and hopefully this webinar helped with that. If you do run into any additional issues or have extra questions during the application process, we do have a full team at the Earthwatch Institute ready to support you. So if you have technical glitches or anything like that, feel free to email ignite@earthwatch.org. Hopefully that contact information is in the email you originally received from us. And you're welcome to ask any questions if you have issues with your application. So with that, thanks for your attention and best of luck in the application process. We look forward to hopefully awarding you and seeing your applications come through before the December 14th deadline. Thanks a lot.